This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming out Wednesday morning, it's June 5th, and the plan for today's show is to begin doing our season recaps by position. We'll start today with the guards, who I chose to be Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Jordan McLaughlin, Monte Morris, and then mentioned Wendell Moore Jr. and Dacian Nix briefly there at the end. Next week, we'll do a wings episode focusing on Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, Josh Minot. I also shoved Nickeil Alexander-Walker into that group because it's a little thin. So that'll be coming up next week, along with a Bigs episode on obviously Gobert, Towns, Reed, Garza, and Leonard Miller. We'll maybe do that later next week. Chris Hine from the Star Tribune will be joining us for today's episode to dig into those guards here in a couple of minutes. But I quickly wanted to touch on off the top that we already have received some Wolves offseason news. Tuesday night, it was reported by The Athletic that Tim Conley restructured his contract and will be back for next season. When Conley, of course, was originally hired, he signed a 5-year contract worth $40 million, $8 million a year. But that contract had an opt-out in it after 2 seasons. These 2 seasons that he's completed, that opt-out was positioned to happen when the ownership change was previously scheduled to happen, right? The opt-out was put in place to give Conley a path out if things got funky with the ownership transition. Obviously, that funkiness has happened, but even through that, Conley still wants to be here. Was able to come to a new deal with the Wolves organization, both ownership groups. That new deal sees him receive a raise, another raise. He'll now be paid $15 million a year, it's been reported, but probably the most noteworthy bit from this contract is that this contract also has an opt-out in it. Conley can opt out after next season. Again, pretty easy here, right? To connect the dots that Conley does, I think understandably, does not want to commit long-term to this franchise until there is a clear path forward as it relates to ownership. So basically, he gets this raise and functionally a 1-year contract extension, and that buys the ownership group some time to kind of iron out whatever it is that they're going through here. And while that ironing is happening, Conley has a big task at hand for deciding how this franchise moves forward this summer. As we're here, the financial crunch is here. Anthony Edwards is receiving nearly a $30 million raise for next season. Jaden McDaniels, nearly a $20 million raise for next season. Karl Anthony Towns receiving a $15 million raise that gets him up to nearly $50 million in salary for next season. So there's a lot of things that Tim Conley has to dig into this summer. Even if the long-term future of Conley is not yet known, it is known that he will be calling the shots this summer. Conley and his staff, were brought in 2 years ago by Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lowry and that new ownership group that was, coming in to proceed or to follow Glenn Taylor. So Conley, understandably, is waiting around, much like the rest of us, to see if Rodriguez and Lowry will in fact be the owners of this team. To be determined on that front. Of course, we're still waiting for arbitration to maybe play out over the course of this summer, next fall. But it's nice that this, from a Conley standpoint, has been taken care of well in advance of the draft coming up here in a few weeks and free agency in July. So Conley and his staff can dig into the task at hand, and he'll be here for at least next season. But for now, on this show, we're going to dig into recapping the season that was for the Wolves guards. Quick reminder here off the top, though, that we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Game 1 of the NBA Finals is tonight. And I was looking through for some of my picks. There's a Jason Tatum free square there. If he scores a point, more than a point, or more than half a point, you get that square for free. And then pairing that with another one, I was looking at, Luka Doncic here, more or less than 31.5 points. If it holds true that, Luka needs to be more of a scorer and less of a passer against Boston in the way they guard, I think him having more than 31.5 points makes sense. Again, if you just kind of get that Tatum square and the Doncic square, that free Tatum square together, if you were to put down $20, that would turn into 66 If it wins, I also kind of like if you go Doncic 34.5, more than 34.5, you kind of boost it there. Your $20 entry would pay out 82.50, basically just if Luka Doncic scores 35 plus points. So I think these things are a little bit more fun to dig into in the rest of the playoffs when you need something else on the line there. So prizepicks.com, prizepicks app, promo code Dane if you want a $100 sign up bonus. And then also just quickly a reminder that you can get all of your off-season Wolves content in one place on the Autograph app. I can scan the QR code on the screen here to download the Autograph app in the App Store or the Google Play Store. And what Autograph is all the Wolves team content, all the YouTube videos you find there, all in one app. My show, all in that app. All the writing, all in one app. So as you're looking, to kind of tap in and out of Wolves stuff this summer, go to the Autograph app, go to their Timberwolves community, and you will find, all of the most recent content on the team there. Again, that's the Autograph app. Use referral code DaneMoore to let them know that you came from us. And yeah, try out the Autograph app there. Until we'll be back here shortly with Chris Hine, who will get here on the horn, and we'll talk about these guards. Hey, yeah. All right, we are now joined by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine, and like I said, we're getting into the guards today, and Chris is writing a book on one of those guards. Seriously, huge congratulations, Chris. This is awesome. I know you let me know a couple weeks ago that something like this was happening, but Chris Hine, Wolves beat writer, writing a Anthony Edwards biography, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's still, I don't think, is quite sunk in all the way yet that this is happening, which is probably it. Hopefully it does soon, because I have to get to writing this thing sooner than later. So
that works.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's gonna be my summer will be entirely revolved around this. I expect to spend a lot of time in Atlanta, and maybe kind of going back and forth between Minneapolis and Atlanta reporting this. It's going to be all encompassing about his early life, teenage years, year at Georgia, and 4 years with the Timberwolves. And we'll just kind of see all the different directions this leads. Very excited for it.
I mean, I would imagine it's just something you can't really know what it's going to be until you start doing it, right? And getting the interviews. I guess it's just like writing any story, but like a much bigger one. So you have to explore before you know.
Yeah, exactly. And the more interviews you do, it shapes, how you're going to be writing and reporting it and where the story is going to go. But what's funny is I actually sat down yesterday and started writing for the first time.
Wow.
I haven't done any interviews yet. That'll be coming up as I kind of get organized and everything. And I'm taking a little break here for a few weeks just to recharge. But yeah, right. But I sat down and I was like, what are the things I could write about now while I'm kind of waiting for the interview? So I was just writing about like the context in which Anthony Edwards came to the Timberwolves, like the seasons leading up to it. So I was like, well, that I could just write off of the top of my head. So it was a fun little trip down memory lane yesterday, revisiting the 2018-19 season and the 2019-20 season.
You thought that was fun?
Exactly. So I started writing some of that yesterday.
Well, it was. I mean, that is literally what got them the number one.
Correct.
Which got them Anthony Edwards. Yeah, that was just a bizarre time in Timberwolves history, a bizarre time in
the world.
And and now here you are writing a book on Anthony Edwards. Seriously, I think that's so cool. An opportunity that is earned and not just and just plopped in your lap. You've been as close to Ant as anyone has over these 4 years that he's been in the NBA. So that's going to be cool. No real action items here for listeners. We just wanted to announce that from Chris. That time will come though.
Yeah, making people aware of it. Hopefully people will remember to pre-order once, and we will be bombarding you with that information once it is available.
Must be nice to be writing a book on the guy who's getting like 150 million social media impressions. I don't think this podcast is gonna give you that much.
Well, we'll see.
Book on Ant.
That's we'll see how the publisher wants to try and market that. Those are people that know what they're doing on that front. So I'm just going to write the thing. I'm going to do what they tell me to do in terms of marketing it, and then let them handle the rest.
Well, let's talk about Ant and his season, as I mentioned off the top and in the email I sent to you, just as a way to kind of guide us through talking about all of these players. Is we want to talk about an area of each of the guards in this episode's where they improved, plateaued, regressed. However, we want to take that in terms of what their season looked like. Chris, I'll just start like off the top to kind of get just the counting numbers thing out of the way. Ant averaged 25.9 points, 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists per game this season, after averaging 24.6, 5.8, and 4.4 per game a season ago. But he played more minutes a season ago, so you kind of extrapolated out per minute, per 100 possessions, whatever. We can say we saw a real progression in Ant's scoring and assists in terms of what the counting stats moved. The rebounding kind of remained solid there. He shot 51.5% from 2-point range and 35.7% from 3-point range, which, like, when I was looking at that, I was like, really, it went down to that low. But it was the rough stretch there at the end of the season. That's about the same 2-point percentage as a season ago, and a slight drop in 3-point percentage.
I think he lost. I wrote about this during the playoffs, but I think he lost, like, I want to say 2 percentage points on his 3-point.
Wasn't it literally like an 0 for 23 or something?
Yeah. It was like literally like 1 or 0 for something. And over the last 12 games, he lost. Like, he went from I think he went down 2 whole percentage points because of the last 12 games. It was very strange.
It was strange. He missed a bunch there. I was just, when I was looking at those, I was like, wow, I would have thought he would have been closer to 40% than
he was on track. He was on track to at least be better than last year. And then that stretch absolutely killed his percentages.
But probably not something to freak out about if you just kind of get sunk at the end here, or the end of the season there. Well, let's each just kind of rattle through like an improvement, a plateau, and or a regression. Do you have one that stands out to you that you want to hit first?
Yeah, let's go improvement first. I just free throw shooting and drawing fouls, and an improvement for him this year. Free throw rate up to 6.4 attempts per game from 5.3, and his percentage at the line was up to 84% from 76%. So positive sign there that Ant is drawing more fouls, getting to the free throw line more, and converting them at a higher rate. So a big note on his efficiency from that angle there. And that's something that they had talked about. I think 6 was kind of the goal coming into the season that they had set, like, get to the line 6 times a night, and he exceeded that. So, just keep going up from there and try to keep finding a way to get to the line, and, yelling at the officials when you don't.
You wrote about that, I think, actually, like a couple times over the course of this season, whether it was Finch talking about that being a need, Ant talking about it, or like a lot of the player development stuff that he did with Chris Hines, his PD coach. And I think, that's like, those are the best kind of improvements where you go, oh, okay, I see the player doing something different that is leading to these numbers going up, right? Like, sometimes when it's just a number going up, you can be like, all right, cool, they shot. We're going to talk about Jordan McLaughlin at the very end, right? So he shoots 47% this year, and you go, okay, or 47% from 3 this year. You go, okay, is that an improvement? Like, did he make a huge jump there, or was it a smaller sample size or whatever? Like, with the Ant free throw thing, it was a stated goal. It was something he changed his game to get better at, and did it. I had that down as one of my main things for him too. I think my thing was when I just kind of started looking at the numbers, what stood out to me was his usage rate. So what I wrote down as his improvement was he not only became more efficient, but did so while becoming higher usage. And that's hard, right?
Yeah.
I didn't properly contextualize how high of a usage player he was this year. I was just looking at it. Number 1 in usage this season, Luka Doncic. Number 2, Joel Embiid. Number 3, Anthony Edwards. It was like Anthony Edwards, Giannis, and Cade Cunningham. All right there. I mean, to be that high in usage, I mean, ahead of Jokic, LeBron, Mitchell, Tatum, and, usage is using a possession. But basically, that's ball in your hand. That's playing through that player. We can all picture what that looks like with Luka and Embiid. And I feel like Ants doesn't seem as direct as those guys, but the numbers ultimately say he's using more and more possessions, maybe not consecutively possession over possession, but that he was able to do that and improve his just efficiency. I had like his points per shot attempt was like exactly 50th percentile last year. This year it's up to 67th percentile, while also making that jump in usage. Also, kind of the turnovers went down a little bit. That's important, about being efficient while your usage goes up there. And I think just a lot of it was kind of to what you were saying with the free throw element, was just getting kind of better at navigating the middle of the floor, making that decision of, all right, here I am at 15 feet. Am I passing it to the corner? Am I pulling up here? Am I getting to the free throw line? Rather than just, obviously there were some low times and rough times with turnovers, but in the aggregate, he was a more used player who shot the ball better on those possessions and turned it over less than a season ago. So that's a pretty major improvement, particularly when you stitch it together with the free throw shooting.
Yeah, I'm surprised it was that high. Just because I've just thinking about like Luka and Embiid, and like you said, you just envision those guys like, Finch used the term heliocentric the other day in his post-game press conference. There's an SAT word for everybody out there. And Ants specifically, Finch does not design the offense to be a heliocentric offense, because we know it's all based on the flow and all that stuff, and that we talk about ad nauseum. But yeah, I guess I am a little surprised by that. And just looking at the numbers, you wouldn't think that, right? Because it's like, okay, he took 0.2 more shot attempts per game. He turned it over a little less. Like,
What I will say is Luka and Embiid are way higher than him.
That's okay.
So it's not like he's not like nipping on.
It's a different tier. It's a different tier.
Yes, that's probably a good qualifier there. But to say he's the same usage as Giannis, that's still that's still saying something. To say it's more than LeBron, more than Donovan Mitchell, more than Jason Tatum. That's more the tier, I think, in our heads. Just watching it, we'd be like,
that makes more sense.
He has the ball about as much as LeBron, and he's a little bit ahead of that. Do you have a plateau or regression?
Let me see. I have what do I have for regression here? And I don't even know if it's more regression or kind of a combo of plateaus. And
So in regression, I was like, with a 22-year-old on the rise, we clearly aren't talking about like a skill set getting worse. It's a product of, the way you're being guarded, the personnel you're surrounded by, some like sort of external factor.
Yeah, I have just, this is just kind of shot distribution here. I have fewer field goal attempts at the rim, 5.4 per game in the restricted area compared to 6.5 a season ago. Non-restricted area paint attempts went up to 3.8 from 2.7, and the mid-range went from 2.9 last year to 3.8. So, and maybe I don't know how much of this has to do with him getting fouled a little bit more at the rim, which doesn't count as a shot attempt. So maybe that factors into it a little bit, but I think it also is notable that the other shot attempts outside of the restricted area, the non-paint restricted area, and then the mid-range, each went up by about a shot attempt per game.
That was the same thing I had down was, shot selection. decision making in shot selection went down. And I think that's weird to say when we were just complimenting him for what he was doing in the middle of the floor.
But that's what I was just going to say. I don't even know if it's necessarily like, if it's like kind of criticizing him. I think it's just he was altering his game, and we've heard him say this, and like, to be more effective in the middle of the floor, to get guys to come out from the rim a little more and guard him more honestly in the mid-range, he's had to develop a mid-range game.
Exactly.
So this is all part of kind of his plan, and to loosen up a defense, for instance.
I think so, absolutely. That's why I was like, we're going to need to like explain this one a little bit. And so then I was thinking like, okay, that is true about the mid-range stuff. That's an important part of his game that he did develop and will be going forward. It's not like, I'm not just, and you aren't either, like shaking our finger at Ant taking mid-range shots. That's going to be part of his game and is necessary. He's improving there. The fair critique I thought of going into it was choosing to take twos in situations where he could have taken a spot up three.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, here's the opportunity to take a semi-contested three, just catch and shoot. Or, I can kind of
dribble into the mid-range and take a more open but 15-footer. Yeah.
And so I went to, and this stuff isn't perfect, but like just looking at some of the tracking stuff, it shows that in spot up situations, so when he catches it in, a catch and shoot situation, both his 2-point percentage and his 3-point percentage went down this season. And volume of the 3-point percentage. So what that says to me, when the 2-point percentage goes down in a spot up situation, means, okay, I caught it behind the 3-point line, but I'm coming into 2-point range now and hitting that shot at a lower clip than he did a season ago. And so that's where I think the critique would be is, when you can take a spot up three, do it a little bit more than he did this season. I mean, this year, 70% of his shots were twos, 30% were threes.
Right.
You go back a year, I mean, this is basically what you were saying, but this is just twos versus threes. So 70% of his shots were twos this season. 66% of his shots were twos last year. The year before that, only 55% of his shots were twos.
I was actually noticed that in researching. Like 2 years ago, he had like a more analytically perfect shot balance.
I don't remember that. Like, or why did that happen?
Well, because he hadn't worked on his mid-range game yet. He hadn't spent multiple off seasons now.
That's true.
Working on his mid-range game, and and Finch is obviously, the coaching staff's obviously in his ear, being like, threes are to the rim, right?
Yeah.
And this was before he decided he was going to add a mid-range game. So it does make sense in my mind that 2 years ago his shot distribution was more analytically sound than it is now. Mm-hmm. That's not to say it's better. Yeah,
it's like evolving,
it's a better player
right?
now than he was 2 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I think he's moving in the right direction. But I would again imagine if you're the coaching staff, the player development staff, the analytics staff, you go, okay, well, here we go. We have a really good player who's evolving and becoming more and more impactful. What are schematic or stylistic ways that you could bump that up a little bit more? That's really all I had down for like the ascending superstar. Just for my plateau though, of like something that didn't necessarily get better or worse. I think most people would disagree with this, but I had down defensive impact. I think Ant started getting a lot more attention for his defense this season
because the Wolves as a whole were really good. Maybe,
that's what I was thinking. And in many ways, like, he deserves that, or at least one way. He's really good in isolation defense. He's a hound on the ball, right? Struggles with attentiveness and execution when off ball. I just think those things were true a season ago, which is to say, I think he was probably a better defender a season ago than the way he was perceived. I would disagree with the idea that he made like a defensive leap this season.
I think that's fair. I don't, having watched the games and watched him the last few years, I think if anything, he was being underappreciated too, last season and previous years, and maybe the hype has kind of caught up to it a little bit. So I think that's a good one. I was a little surprised at the rebounding numbers for my little plateau. I mean, it went down a little bit, but that would be kind of my plateau candidate here is 5.4 rebounds compared to 5.8 a season ago. I thought he would have been better. I don't know. It felt like he was a better rebounder, maybe because the team overall was better at rebounding this season.
There was less of the long rebound problems that were a couple years ago, or even the beginning of the Gobert year, where it was like, okay, these probably need to be Ant, and Finch said they needed to be Ant a little bit more. There's like, that's again, I think that goes with the defense one, where there's just like a couple of things with Ant where you go, these are about the degree to which he's putting in effort on that defensive possession. I think his playoff numbers in all of it defensively or in rebound numbers go up, right? When you just kind of have, when Ant has that dial turned up. We know what it looks like when Ant gets like 9, 10, 11 rebounds in a game. He's jumping up, he's hunting them, you know?
Yeah, and he had, I'm looking at the playoff stats. He had 8 rebounds a game in the Phoenix series.
Yeah.
8.8 in the Dallas series.
And the Denver one was lower, right? Because he was guarding Murray.
Yeah.
Because he was guarding Murray. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is like, if nothing else, the rebounding and the defense is an inconsistent thing, right? With him, where it
still not terrible. It's not bad, but the rebounding isn't bad. Like, I'm not saying this to say he's a bad rebounder. It's just and we know he's a good defender overall. Like, he's generally a plus defender when he's on the floor. So
I mean, the defensive numbers are like, that's why I was like, man, am I ripping on the like defensive estimated plus minus as an 88th percentile this season? Like, that's really, really up there. But to my point, it was really up there a year before too. It was 86th percentile.
Well, I guess my question about that stat would be, how is it compared to other people that have a usage rate of his caliber? You know,
like that's the impressive thing.
That are doing the same thing on the offensive end and still having as big of an impact on the defensive end as he. Yeah,
Luka's not doing that.
Right. Like,
exactly. Those aren't Luka's. I mean, and Ant's helped defensively by the other defenders he has around him. But that's always the one area with Ant I'm always like, kind of like somewhat skeptical about, but also being like, maybe you just have some like outsized expectations, you know, for what he could be defensively. I think that's coming. Just the last thing I wanted to note on Ant, and then we'll take a break, is this was the final year of his 4-year, $44 million rookie contract. He's almost going to make $44 million next year
alone. Yes.
He made all NBA. So that triggered in his contract, makes his new deal for 30% of the cap. So his new contract starts at $42.3 million next season, will be year one of a 5-year, $245 million contract. Any final stray Ant thoughts?
We'll see what this offseason does for him. It's a different offseason for him. I mean, he did USA basketball last year, obviously, and it seemed to help him. He's doing it with the big boys this year, obviously. So, you hear those stories all the time about, like LeBron and Kobe, LeBron learning from Kobe in 2008 and all that stuff. And, what's that summer going to be like? What's that experience going to be like for Ant? So I think for his offseason, there's going to be a lot that we don't know yet about how he's going to attack his offseason, because I think USA basketball will have a big impact on where he goes once that's over.
I'm a pretty big believer now in that's going to have a pretty immense impact.
Yeah.
Just in part and seen it last season, talking to people. I'm very curious to see what that looks like. And it is, he was with kind of his age peers last summer, and this summer he's going to be with the older guard, which I think will be an even more beneficial thing. Let's grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by the Dream Team at Supreme Lending. And if you're ready for a winning mortgage experience, meet Ben Coulter with the Mortgage Dream Team at Supreme Lending. They're in Edina, Minnesota. Over 20 years in the business. Ben knows how to help you out in winning your mortgage deal. Ben's a dedicated Wolves fan. He's been going to games since the Metrodome back in '89, and he'd love to work with more of you Wolves fans. Just some quick notes on the Mortgage Dream Team. They offer a deep playbook, as it says here in my notes. 8-day close your loan in as fast as 8 days for a leg up on the competition. $25,000 close on time guarantee. They guarantee your deal closes on time, and they're part of the Minnesota Housing Program, which is up to $18,000 in down payment or closing cost assistance. In addition, if you contact them, mention T-Wolves special, you'll be eligible for 1% below your note rate. Call Ben today at 612-268-5454 or visit twolvesmortgages.com for more information. And we're a lot of these ads we're talking about the home buying experience. Ben Coulter, the Mortgage Dream Team, can help you out with your mortgage, but also you need help finding that place. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. We've been telling you about Adriana and help you out in the process all season. Up on the screen here, you can see if you go to the dancingrealtor.com and book a strategy session with Adriana, you will be entered to win free Timberwolves tickets for next season. The home buying process requires help. Adriana can really help you there. Again, go to the dancingrealtor.com or 715-304-9920 to book a consultation. Again, get the ball rolling on home ownership and score a pair of free Wolves tickets at the dancingrealtor.com. All right, Chris. Next guard up, Mike Conley. With Conley, again, I want to just kind of rattle through some improvements, plateaus, and regressions, which is very different to do for a 36-year-old versus a 22-year-old. I was like, okay, this one's a little bit different here.
Yeah.
Let me just rattle through some of these, just his counting stats stuff. 11.4, 2.9, 5.9 were his numbers this season in 29 minutes per game. Last season, if you include both Minnesota and Utah, 11.9, 2.7, and 6.7 assists in 30 minutes per game. Again, per 100 possessions, that sort of thing. Scoring, rebounding, and assisting all relatively plateaued, which again is a win when you jump from year 35 to 36. Statistically, obviously, where we saw the biggest jump was in his shooting percentages. 38.5% from three last season. He shot a career high 44.2% from deep this season. Again, that was the best of his career. He also had one of his best 2-point shooting seasons of his career at 48.1%. I didn't really know that. The highly efficient shooting he showed after the trade deadline when he was acquired last season, which we were kind of like, is this a blip? He hasn't done that in 4 years. That actually sustained. His numbers in Minnesota, shooting percentage wise, are better than the rest of his career. In his career in Minnesota, 43.6% from three as a Wolf. Rest of his career, 38.1%. 2-point percentage in Minnesota, 49.1%. Rest of his career, 46.9%. I knew his numbers went up. That's pretty impressive, and that's the statistical things that jumped out to me.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's what I had down for the improvements is the shooting, and the 3-point shooting in particular. It's he became a very knockdown kind of shooter. Like it was impressive to see, and he was doing it in all ways. He was creating those threes for himself sometimes, whether it be the little step back he does or just spotting up and knocking down the open looks that Ant and others might create for him. I think we were all wondering if that version of Mike Conley was going to show up this year, and it did. They were able to keep his minutes right around 30 no matter what. There were very few times they went over it. He stayed healthy. 76 games is more game. He played 77, or sorry, no, he played 66 last year. 67. Yeah. So 76 games. I'm looking at this is the most games he's played since 2012 and 13. So he played the most games in the season in a long time. Yeah. So a hell of a Mike Conley season just overall. Contributing to the defensive end of the floor, it was hard to try to find things for the other categories for Mike Conley here in terms of plateau and regression.
I think
I found something.
Go. Yeah.
For plateau, I said effectiveness in the lane and the floater game. Like the percentages there were just kind of and just from the eye test, the floater just never really seemed to lock in for me this year for him. Like, I mean, I know what the percentages say from like 2 point, his 2 point percentage and everything. I don't know. There was just something off about the floater game whenever I would see it this year.
So I have that down too.
Yeah.
I did it like kind of tucked into. I had improvement. I had the shooting efficiency. I thought that was obvious. There are points to shooting efficiency, right, that are beyond just what you shoot from three, though, right?
Right.
It's also about your shot distribution, and as I knew I was going to choose shooting efficiency, because the 3-point percentage was up. Like looking at the other stuff, I think what we saw to your floater point is he doesn't have that to the same extent that he did earlier in his career. He doesn't have that same, like, I think that is a part of the game that requires some burst, some last minute, decision. And I don't think it locked in. So what we saw was that volume went down a little bit. The amount of floaters he took, and he shot a career high at the rim. I think and I remember particularly seeing this in the playoffs, a little bit more like insistence to be like, if I have you on my hip, I'm going to get all the way.
Yeah.
Rather than to that floater, what's that little righty floater that defines so much of Conley's, career. So yeah, it's not to say that like the floater got like
bad
to the plateau point there, but I think what was good about his season was redistributing that shot distribution, so the floater wasn't like a main stay in the diet there.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I feel like he does a good. I mean, he's so smart, and he's aware of what his limitations are, and this is why he's only playing 30 minutes a game, and this and that. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves next year. Maybe something we put a pin in to ask him about where he feels that part of his game is. Once we hit training camp next year, and kind of what to expect out of him from an offensive standpoint. And just honestly, next season where he feels like he fits in to the offense, which I think could stand to use a little more assertive scoring from somebody that's not Ant or Cat, especially in postseason situations like we saw.
Yeah, that's the weird one where the number. I mean, what I have down here is points per shot attempt among point guards. Number 1 in the NBA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Number 2 in the NBA, Mike Conley. Like, so all of these numbers say this dude should be shooting more. But when the guy is 36 going on 37,
you can't have him carrying that much of an offensive load. Yeah, it's like he's not going to be first in points per shot attempt among point guards if he's taking more shots. That number's going to go down.
Exactly. So what are like the diminishing returns?
Right, exactly. Where's the fine line?
Load?
Yeah.
That's what for plateau. I didn't really have anything, so I said the amount of minutes he played, which is actually really a compliment. I
had a regression candidate, and it's not so much him as the team as a whole, but we do give him a lot of credit for this when it works, and I feel like we rag on it a lot with the team as a whole, but just late game offense.
Sure.
Late in the season took a step back from where it started the year. We all know what their net rating was from like January onward when it came to late game offense. It's after starting out really strong. It just seemed like, whether it's Finch, Conley, and trying to figure everything out, they never quite got on the same page the second half of the season. And those warts showed up a little bit in the playoffs in the Western Conference Finals. So I had that as just kind of a regression.
Oh, that's a good one. It's part of his job.
It's
clearly part of his job responsibilities. Is that being that stabilizing.
And I realized that one of the biggest moments of the year he wasn't on the floor for, which was Game 2 of the Dallas series. So but yeah, just in general, the late game offensive struggles, were one of the main reasons why they lost that Dallas series.
That's good. I think that's better than mine. I might just kind of have this a little bit on my mind extra, given the playoffs. But what I put down for a regression was like defensive physicality. And just that when it was like a bigger team there, he's chasing that a little bit. Right. And I don't know, that could have been the case 5 years ago. It's the same size. Like, I think it's about size more than it is
age.
Yeah. But I would imagine, I think it's logical to include age into that, probably some too. But I just remember that, that first Boston game back in November of the season where like the Wolves, that was like the first time I'm like, okay, the Wolves might actually be like pretty awesome this year. But I do remember in that game when you're playing against Boston, who's like, every guy's like 6'4", 6'5", and bigger. I remember being like, okay, Mike Conley is a little bit undersized in this matchup, and if he gets switched on to Jaylen Brown, like that's probably trouble, whatever, for the Wolves there. And I think there's a limited amount of teams that can really punish that. But I think Dallas really hunted Mike Conley's physicality in the in the Western Conference Finals. They tried to hide Mike on Derrick Jones Jr. After kind of experimenting with him on Kyrie Irving, and that put Mike Conley in situations to be the guy who's guarding the screener and guarding the roll man and that sort of thing. And he doesn't. Again, I don't know if it's fair to say that's a regression, but it's an area that he didn't. That hurt the team a little bit in that way. Again, it might be just a product of being like, hey, here you are in the Western Conference Finals. This is harder now. Yeah. But that's what came to mind as like a nitpick on Mike Conley's season.
Yeah, that's what we're essentially doing here is like just nitpicking
for sure.
Little things because overall the body of work was really impressive.
Absolutely, and way exceeded expectations for what we thought 36-year-old Mike Conley would be, and I weirdly like go into year 37 of Mike Conley, and I just don't picture that much regression. I just think he really
I don't either. I mean, I think with the way he plays offense and navigates things now, I think he's got it figured out, and he's I just like where he's at right now, and he seems to have accepted the role and knows what this team needs out of him, and is willing to adapt his game, and whether it's overall or on a night-to-night basis, generally to compensate for what they might be missing. So,
and that's why they opted to give him a contract extension. He finished the final year of his 3-year, $68 million contract this season, and then signed a mid-season extension for 2 years and $21 million. So all those numbers that we were listing off there that were effective and efficient, they were pretty good at $24 million a year, whatever he was making, 22.
They'll be even better now.
Yeah. At $10 million, you can actually bake in a ton of regression, and that's still, a good contract for him. Again, if he gets hurt and he's not able to, play a lot next season, that's really the only way where you go, that contract wasn't worth it. If Mike Conley can even play half the games next season and it's $10 million and you have him in the playoffs, you're like, that is a major win. I left Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the guards, not because he's not a guard, but just for my content planning here. The wing position's a little thin if you try to be if you put Anthony Edwards in as a guard. So we're gonna leave Nickeil off. We'll do that in the next episode. But just that was
one less player I had to do homework on yesterday. Yes, Dane gave me homework yesterday. Everybody,
off season, baby.
I had to prepare notes for today, like I was going to class.
Your homework assignment. Well, see how I grade you. Just quickly, Jordan McLaughlin and Monte Morris. We don't have to go through a progression, regression, and plateau for all of them, but maybe just like a thing from each of those guys that stood out to you.
Obviously with J-Mac, I think we're both looking at the same thing. I just have 47% from 3-point range, exclamation point.
That is exactly what I said.
That's my note on Jordan McLaughlin. But listen,
it's an interesting one though, right? Like
it is, but it is like it's
because I'm not like it's fixed. It's not fixed. It's not all like good.
I think he generally has a good looking shot. Like I don't think like he's I've always thought he should have been a better shooter than he he was. I don't know. This year just all kind of clicked. I thought just in general, and this is maybe just a way to say like J-Mac after an injury riddled season last season, felt like he got back more to form this season when he had his opportunities. And, I think, maybe that just leads to, if you can bring him back very cheaply, similar to what you had him here now, why not? Right. Especially on a team that needs a little backup point guard help. And, he knows the system. He's teammates like him, like in a pinch, he could run the show. So I just going into the off season, I think it's just for the Wolves purposes, good to see him returning to form. And I think if it was this time last year, we'd be sitting here saying if J-Mac was a free agent last year, I don't think we'd be saying he'd be coming back. But I think this year, I think it's a possibility now that he's coming back.
I do too. I mean, like, and part of this, and this is Monte Morris as well, is like, somebody's got to play backup point guard next year,
right?
For the Wolves. And so if you say, I don't want it to be Jordan McLaughlin, I don't want it to be Monte Morris.
And who's it going to be?
You're picking off of the minimum pile, right? Like, just given where they are.
Also Kyle Anderson might be walking out the door, who's, quasi point guard.
That's a good point.
So
ups the need.
Right now, the only point guard that's under contract that's a contributor is Nikhil. That's your backup point guard ish.
And I think that's an interesting path they have to choose with Nikhil. Is right, he just kind of pops onto the scene at the end of last season. Like, okay, awesome defender. Like, what does this look like? More of that. And to play him more, they had to play him more at point guard this season. And it's still I don't know. It doesn't seem like they are totally firm in what position they want to use Nikhil at. And if the answer to that comes out is maybe we don't really see him to be a distributor. And
the other thing that
point guard needs to.
Yeah, the other thing that you have to be, and we're talking about Nikhil when we specifically said we weren't going to talk about Nikhil.
I gotta do that.
But the other thing with him is you have to be, and they've talked a lot about this, about Nikhil just understanding who he is as a player, understanding his role. I don't think you want to overload him with too much responsibility because it might mix him up. And he was in such a great groove this year, just doing what he did in his role, that I don't think you want to. I think adding to his plate and putting more on his plate might threaten his overall effectiveness. If that makes sense.
I think so. And to do that is to not do that is to put him more in the wing category.
Right.
Which I think there's indications that could be the best position too. It doesn't, it's not like an overcorrection of based on personnel of choosing his position. I think they're still trying to figure out Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And by still trying to figure him out is to say that he's not a true point guard yet. Yeah. So if you do lose Kyle Anderson and Jordan McLaughlin and Monte Morris are backup point guards, I actually think that really pushes you to have one of them return, because you can re-sign one of those players because they're already on your team. You have their bird rights.
You have their bird rights,
for more than the minimum.
Correct.
You're not going to be able to probably get a point guard better than Monte Morris
for the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, almost certainly not. Could you draft someone? You could do a trade or whatever. Right. But if we're looking at it pretty much through if it's just free agency, one of these two guys kind of needs to be your option there. I think, to your point with J-Mac, he just seems very comfortable in doing J-Mac things. When he gets out of the floor, he's going to get out there, scratch around, be the spark. And the impact of that, or how long the impact of that lasts, to me is always about until he starts missing open threes, right? Sure. They start ignoring him. But if he's hitting those, then you can extend him for a long time. And to the 47% point, most of the season, it was a great option. You could play him for as long as you wanted, because even if they left him open, he was knocking him down.
Yeah.
Playoffs, comes in immediately, is ignored, missed 2 or 3 in a row right away in that one quarter against Dallas. So there's a volatility to J-Mac there. But I think it is really important to note that the key J-Mac things he's really comfortable with that and knows he can do that at like an NBA level. I think he's really confident in what he can for sure do in the league. The Monte Morris one's tougher. Like we saw 400 minutes of them, probably 100 of which were garbage time.
Right.
Like I know that much about him before.
I think I'm in my mind. I think with Monte Morris, this was just a lost season for him, and it's unfortunate for him that it comes on in a contract year, right? But I just think with the injuries that he dealt with early in the season, he probably never got in a rhythm. This whole season, he worked when he got to Minnesota. His goal was to be ready for April. He got his body as right as he possibly could. And I thought at times in the regular season, he looked like he was a natural fit in what the offense was trying to do. And we know Tim Connelly is a big fan of his, obviously had him in Denver and brought him back here. So, given the Connelly connection, and I think if you're the front office and you're Connelly, you can say, well, all right, if we bring Monte back and he has an off season a healthy off season, what does that look like if he's just in better shape, healthier coming into next October? And to your point, is that worth more of a gamble than letting him go and trying to find somebody else? And I think the answer is probably yes. If you can find a way to bring him back, I don't know what he's going to command.
That's the thing.
What's the market for Monte Morris this offseason? I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, and like I think we would all agree better than other minimum point guard X.
Yeah,
but if he's going to make $5 million more than minimum point guard X when you're in the luxury tax and whatever. Now that's 12 million, whatever.
You're paying $17 million to have Monte Morris on your team for.
So that's what I would imagine. If it doesn't get there, it's a tax squeeze more than anything. The one like positive thing I had written down with him is I thought he fit really well into the team defensive, like the team's defensive identity.
I thought so too. I thought he did okay. Yeah, I thought he acquitted himself well on the defensive end.
Like he came in and he's like, okay, like this is what this team is about. Like so as to integrate myself into this, like I gotta guard. None of the and I didn't have like a ton of memory of like what Monte Morris was as a defender prior to Minnesota. But you look at some of the numbers. He's undersized. You thought like. I remember at that time doing a show about the Monte Morris thing. It was like, the good thing is like you have such a good defensive team, so you can survive Monte Morris's below average defense. I didn't view Monte Morris as a below average defender. Once watching him, I thought he really fought well into that end. And if he does come back, I think he does fit into the greater identity of this team, which is obviously defense first. But is also on the offensive side of the ball. We play a point guard, and like he's one of the true point guards left out there. So I think in many ways it's a good fit for him too. Even though it wasn't a great I don't think he had like great like Timberwolves experience. Like it wasn't everything he dreamed it would be. But I don't know if that precludes coming back.
I don't think it does. I will say to your point about being a point guard. Between Detroit and Minnesota, and the numbers weren't really that different. This year, he averaged 2.1 assists per game, which was a career low for him. His previous season in Washington, he was at 5.3 and then 4.4 in Denver the year before that. So
kind of got to give him the chance to play maybe a little bit to be the maestro.
To be more of a distributor and create things, But yeah, given where they're at tax-wise, given the ramifications of that and their ability to sign guys because of the bird rights. Yeah. Like I said, I think you can squint and talk yourself into it was a lost season for him injury-wise. Let's get him healthy off season, hit the ground running in October and see what you got.
Because you're going to need a point guard. Like Mike Conley's probably not playing 76 again.
And as the Shake Milton experiment showed, like you can think you have a guy and then it's not a fit, so
next up Shake Milton. No, I'm just kidding. The last thing I've done, we don't have to talk about these guys, but just other guards that were on the roster. Wendell Moore Jr. was kind of on deep freeze again this season, end of the bench. Dacian Nix was a guard on a 2-way contract that I think did play like real minutes in a game or two earlier.
I think I remember that. Yeah, he did put in a meaningful game once upon a time. Yeah,
he did. Nix was just on a 2-way. He'll be a restricted free agent on a 2-way this summer. We'll see if, maybe that's, him coming back is related to what they do at like backup point guard and third string point guard. Like if that, the difference with Wendell is he's under contract for next season. His third year of his rookie contract was guaranteed last fall. So he'll be back on the Wolves at $2.5 million next season, which is a negligible amount, right? If you got rid of him, you'd have to pay another player about 2.2 or something, So it's not like any sort of cap hit with Wendell Moore that forces you to be like, we need to get off of this 2.5 million to get cap space, because it wouldn't do that. The real question with Wendell Moore, and maybe this is determined by what he looks like in summer league, is they have a team option for him for year 4, which will be the following season, but you have to determine that in October. So we'll kind of know if Wendell Moore is at all part of the future or not by October, when they have to make a decision on him for the 25-26 season there. But that's all I got on the guards. Chris, any other stray thoughts?
I'm good, because I got a plane to catch here.
Thank you for getting up early, making this happen.
No problem.
We'll bug you probably closer to the draft to do another episode. And as always, just to listeners, particularly if you're excited about this book and getting your hands on a copy early, be following Chris on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I'm sure he'll be keeping you updated there. And next time there's some movement on whatever next steps are for this, we'll have Chris on too to let you know about it. Really excited about your summer and enjoy at least like these next 10 days or whatever. Think about basketball as little as possible.
Yeah, try to unplug a little bit before a busy summer gets rolling.
And then you're going to sit down tonight after your flight. You're going to watch the NBA Finals.
That's right.
Unplugging. All right. He's Chris. You can follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. Read him in the Star Tribune. Yeah, I think our next episode is going to be on the wings, and we'll get to that sometime next week. Still figuring that out. But until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.